Hi, the following content you're about to watch is actually a redone video that I actually did back in 2017. Redone with all the new fixins that have become standard for the channel. Why am I redoing this video, you ask? Well, as you probably have gathered by now, if you actually go to my channel and look for a video entitled Story Surgery Summer Wars, you won't find it. Why, you may ask? Well, that would be because that video got blocked worldwide into oblivion by the Nippon Television Network Corporation. I tried for years trying to get this video back online, and every time I would make an edit and try to re-upload it, it just wouldn't land. Eventually, I just sort of stopped trying and it was put on the back burner indefinitely. That was until recently, where I think I managed to finally get around the system that was blocking the video for so many years. The following video is literally going to be me talking about how much I love the movie that we're talking about today. I do my best to make sure that I talk about the story elements that are actually present in the film and how we can learn from them, but a lot of it is just me rambling on and just talking about how much I love this film. So sit back, enjoy, and let's begin. Two of the hardest things to do in storytelling are making characters that are fresh and unique and explaining the world that the story takes place in, especially if there's any bit of fantasy mixed in. Many people throughout history have had issues with this, and only a few have managed to really make a character pop and explain the world just in the right way. There's been a rise in group protagonist and expansive history and lore-heavy stories that have come into play as of recently. However, even with a large cast, most of the time these characters are relegated to being far in the background to fluff up the scene, or to sporadically interact with the main characters. Stories, like what you'd see in the Harry Potter franchise, did this quite often. The narratives themselves focused on a smaller group of individuals in a school filled with unique characters, and how those characters would only realistically pop in every now and again throughout the entirety of the story's runtime. Another workaround is to have characters take turns in the spotlight before swapping back over to a previously established perspective. This was the main element that was seen in the Lord of the Rings stories, and how there are multiple points of interest that are split between pods of characters that weren't even interacting with one another for large stretches of the story. Even if you had an ensemble cast in the story, it was rare that you would ever see them in the same place for the entire duration of the story. However, sometimes you get a story that is not only nailing the idea of several main protagonist characters, but manages to explain the world in such a way that it is digestible and understood to the audience. Today, I want to talk about a story that manages to do world building wonderfully, skillfully structure its story, and entertainingly introduce an ensemble cast that manages to feel natural yet informative. But first, a little history. The year was 2009. An animation studio in Nagano, Tokyo, known as Madhouse Incorporated, had released a film that they had been working on for the past 3 years. Directed by Mamoru Osuda, a man whose previous works included the short film Digimon Adventure Our War Game in the year 2000, the 6th theatrical One Piece film in 2005, and The Girl Who Leapt Through Time in 2006. Shortly after the critical and commercial success of A Girl Who Leapt Through Time, Madhouse announced another film was about to begin production. This time, however, the story wasn't based on a novel or an addition to a franchise. Instead, it was an original screenplay by Satoko Ukudera, who had previously worked alongside Osuda on The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. This story was the incredibly well-received film entitled Summer Wars. The plot is a bit of a doozy, but it goes a little something like this. In the near future, the creation of the virtual city of Oz has made it possible for everyone to access the internet from anywhere and anytime. Users control avatars in Oz to shop, pay their bills, and generally have fun. Even businesses use Oz to regulate traffic, water supplies, medical records, and more. The story follows Kenji, a mathematics-focused high school student who spends his summer holidays working as a part-timer, maintaining the Oz system. Then the girl of his dreams, Natsuki, invites him to accompany her to Nagano, her hometown, as a part of a summer job to help out her family's preparation of her 90-year-old grandmother's birthday. When they arrive, Kenji is introduced to the entire Jinnouchi Clan. However, he's a little taken off guard when he realizes that Natsuki has been introducing him as her fiancé. Kenji is tossed into the midst of a large family, and a wild one at that, as it stretches from a newborn child all the way to the 90-year-old grandmother, and is full of all different kinds of characters. The next morning, reports of a lawless avatar wreaking havoc in Oz are all over the news, where the avatar's actions are causing real-world things to be thrown into chaos. Upon finding out that Kenji's account was the source of the rogue avatar, he's maligned as a criminal, and before they know it, Kenji, Natsuki, and the entire Jinnouchi clan are thrown into a battle within the internet that could decide the fate of the real world. A thrilling story with a hint of comedy set in the not-too-distant future. Summer Wars had a different feel for the typical fate of the world storyline. It wasn't one person up against the odds to save the world, but a huge cast of people all working together to defeat this antagonistic force. Most stories that have a large cast of characters don't tend to give them a lot of time to develop, as they're mostly kept to background characters just to make the room feel a little bit more full. Sometimes they show up here or there to add character and differentiation, but most of the time that tends to be it. Today, I want to showcase how this movie from 2009 manages to tackle 3 important elements in storytelling that is not only digestible to an unknown audience, but is believable to the world that it belongs to. How Summer Wars handles a large cast of characters is something that is genuinely surprising to watch upon first viewing. Almost every character is given screen time to establish who they are and develop their personalities enough to make scenes with them count, and they genuinely add to the moments within the story. And the movie does all of this while explaining who the Jinnouchi family is within the first 10 minutes of the film in a way that makes perfect sense. It's the family members that Kenji and Natsuki meet up with on their way to the family home. Each character gives off more information about this family, as well as introduce who they are in the story to Kenji, an outsider to this family who only knows the person he came with purely because, well, of his crush. The locations are given enough time to show off their environment and show off the rich history that's seen within the Jinnouchi family. And then, when the family all comes together for the first time, it's an absolute delight to see their antics and conversations. This feels like a genuine family, which may sound a tad redundant, but that element is important for storytelling. It has a lot to do with feeling. We can be told that these characters are related to one another and that they have some kind of history, but if they don't feel or act like a family, it's really hard for the audience to jive with that. And it can be really easy to yank someone out of the story because of how obvious that these people on screen or on the stage are just actors pretending to be a family. Every line of dialogue exchanged between the Jinnouchi family members have history, a certain weight behind it. It's rare for exposition to be given for no reason, as we're following a character who's never been around any of these characters before. Every single line of exposition that takes place in this story that is spoken by a member of the Jinnouchi family is never being said to somebody who already knows it. It's always given to somebody who does not have history with this family, namely Kenji being our surrogate within the story. And it's great that you get people who pitch lines while somebody is talking about or explaining something, because if you've known somebody for a long time, you're going to do that too. Someone says the napkins were red, someone else corrects them and says they were blue. Someone's giving the history lesson on the family and somebody else just randomly interjects a tangent into the conversation. And some family members will groan and smile because it's common knowledge to them, and every single time a new person comes in, they always gotta give the full-length history lesson. But because Kenji, and to us the audience, we've never heard these stories before, and to hear someone explain it like the family does and realize that how important that kind of history is for them is what makes it feel so grounded. It makes you feel like you're really witnessing people tell their history, the kind of history that they want to make sure gets passed along so it can survive. Even when we get characters being introduced that aren't even liked by the other characters in the story, they're still given enough diegetic, even conversational backstory that makes you understand who and what they are to the other characters. It's not all dumped on the main character either. With the introduction of Wabisuke, the illegitimate son of Grandma Sakae's late husband, the actual explanation of who Wabisuke is actually given away from Kenji. Instead, one of the wives of the Jinnouchi family explained to one of the newer wives of the family, who wasn't there for the events of Wabisuke. Because of the history of the wives of the family, it's not even an elaborate explanation that's given. It's just enough to get the gist of who Wabisuke is and why most of the family flat out despises them. Summer Wars explains things in an understandable way that doesn't demean the audience or over-expect anything of them. How this movie opens is a phenomenal example of this. It takes the audience through the digital world of Oz as if you, the audience, were watching a tutorial about setting up an account. It explains what Oz is and how it's used around the world, how the avatar is customizable, how everything the user does and says as their avatar in the world of Oz is translated automatically and is used used around the world for commerce, economy, and general connectivity. This is brilliant. This is exactly the kind of thing you would get as if you were signing up for a new account of some kind. You go through a tutorial. 3 minutes of the opening scene of this film is explained as if you are somebody who's setting up an account. It's a creative way of adding a lump of exposition right at the start that makes you understand how this tech works in this world so that the story isn't constantly playing catch-up throughout the rest of the narrative to try to get people in the story or the audience to understand what's going on. Even when things do need to be explained diegetically through dialogue, it's reasonable and to the point. When somebody doesn't understand something that's going on, the movie does its best to show you the trouble that is being presented. Sometimes when it comes to Japanese animation being moved to an international audience, this can't be avoided. Sometimes that's just how the scripts and dialogue exchanges were sometimes written. Ever notice how sometimes when you're watching an anime and something just happened on screen and seconds later somebody literally dictates out what just happened even though it just happened? That's what I mean. Sometimes it's quite literally baked in. But the notable difference within Summer Wars is that both in the Japanese and English versions, things are explained in such a way that makes sense for how they are said out loud. People don't just spout information for no good reason within the story. Things are phrased in a way that make it sound like day-to-day talk. It's important that large, technological-sounding words aren't used constantly in the story because a good number of the people who are literally standing in the room wouldn't understand it in the first place. So, to compensate, things are explained in a more easy-to-digest way that's backed up with visual evidence, and sometimes vice versa. How the world, technology, and characters are explained also greatly helps with the weight of the antagonistic force. And don't worry, I have no intention of spoiling this movie for anybody. With the events that happen in this film, because of how the characters, world, and technology are explained to the audience, we both understand what is happening and why it's important. These events aren't a freak accident. It's a series of events that lead to a particular outcome, and for that, we feel the anticipation and frustrations of the characters when presented with a particular problem. It's not just one person shouldering the responsibility of this monumental event. Everyone we've come to know takes an active part, and they feel the strain that's put on by the antagonistic force in the story. There's not one hero in this story, it's a group effort. And that's why I, as a viewer and as a story person, love Summer Wars as much as I do. This is a movie that soars high above so many other stories I've witnessed because of that larger cast and the technological-based element that it has. This movie gives us a reason to not only care about the characters we're following around, but digestibly understand what's going on and why. It's not so far into the future that makes you question how technology will ever become comprehensible at this point. This is technology that, for all case and purposes, is kind of right around the corner. It's both magnificent on how we connect with it, but terrifying because of all the similarities it shares with our world today. Now, I know that there's going to be a few people who will try to make the comment about Summer Wars being very similar to the short film Digimon Adventure Our War Game, which Osada directed in the year 2000. And yeah, they've got a point. The stories are incredibly similar in parts, so much so that people have dedicated videos talking about the visual similarities and plot elements between them. In the description, I'm linking to a video by the user Actar Raikit, where he does a phenomenal job comparing Digimon Adventure Our War Game with Summer Wars, going into the visual similarities as well as certain plot details that actually show how much these two movies have in common. But here is a deciding factor. What Summer Wars does better, as the title of this video suggests, is how it explains the ensemble cast, the environment, and the world of the story, and how exposition is handled throughout. And before I go any farther, I'm not talking about the English film Digimon the Movie. That was two short films being Digimon Adventure Our War Game at the beginning, stitched together with Digimon Hurricane Landing in order to create a feature-length film for English-speaking audiences. I'm specifically talking about Digimon Adventure Our War Game, the short film directed by Mamoru Osada. Got it? Okay. Firstly, Our War Game was based on an established franchise, which means a good portion of the characters and setting aren't actually going to be developed in this short film. Because it's from a series, audiences are expected to know who or what they're seeing in the film before they even see the film. While this is fine for fans of the series, it's not a good thing for newcomers into said series, as a short film does next to nothing to get outsiders to understand who these characters are and the world they inhabit. Apart from characters spouting pronouncing one another's names occasionally, you can't be expected to watch an entire series of an anime just to watch this one short film. Similarly, you can't be expected to explain all of these characters in a short film either, as fans will get annoyed that you're going to run so much of that time being dedicated to things that aren't really needed. It's a catch-22 of short films based on established franchises. Someone's always going to get left out in the long run. What Summer Wars manages to do is establish who these characters are and the world they inhabit within the first 10 minutes of the film. We, as the audience, have never seen this world before, but with a short tutorial within Oz, we get it. We've never seen these characters before, but with their introduction and the short banner they have with one another, we get them. It gives you enough information up front, and it's in a way that makes perfect sense for any level of audience. I could spend hours talking about this movie. It constantly bats around in my head that Summer Wars is just one of my favorite movies of all time. Even though I've watched it dozens upon dozens of times, I still get excited and emotional over the heart-pumping and heart-wrenching scenes. I've watched a lot of movies, believe me, but Summer Wars just hit so many awesome points for me. I cannot recommend this movie enough for anyone who's interested in movies and in storytelling. Whenever you get the time, please sit down and watch this film. You can choose which version of the film you want to watch, either the original Japanese with subtitles or the English dub of the film. The localization team over at Funimation translated this movie fantastically by handling the script to sound much more natural to an English audience, while keeping the soul of the movie intact. This is a movie that understands the concept of making sure that the audience understands both the world we are about to run through, the people we are to run with, and the events and technology that makes this world unique. Summer Wars is a movie I will watch over and over again, and I can only hope that you enjoy it just as much as I do.
Never turn your back on family, even when they hurt you. Never let life get the better of you. And if you remember nothing else, remember to find time to eat together as a family, even when times are rough, especially when times are rough.
Thank you for watching this episode of Story Surgery. Good lord. The amount of times I had to try re-uploading this video over the last 3 years has been insane. I'm glad that I finally was able to get something working that would actually be able to be uploaded to the channel in some way, shape, or form. Anytime I get to talk about Summer Wars is an absolute delight for me personally, and thankfully I didn't have to change the script up that much from when I wrote it back in 2017. The delivery part is definitely a lot different than it was previously, but back then I hadn't quite figured out my voice yet in terms of how I wanted to present myself and the content that I was going to do for this channel. Additionally, if you did manage to catch this, allow me to elaborate. If you did notice that I managed to pronounce the director's last name several different ways throughout the course of this video, sometimes I pronounce it as Hosada, sometimes I pronounce it as Osada, that's purely because there's so many different ways that I've heard his name said in interviews and whatnot that I decided to just kind of cover all the bases just in case. While we're on the subject of the director, please go watch more of the films by Mamoru Hosoda. Oh my lord, please story people, these films are so strange and fun and energetic and weird. I love all of them in various different complex and interesting ways. The Girl Who Leapt Through Time is just a wonderful slice of life kind of story that just has a small hint of sci-fi thrown in. Summer Wars, I can't shut up about. Wolf Children, I mean, if you want to feel all of the emotions on the planet, watch Wolf Children. The Boy and the Beast is a different kind of film, but it definitely has its charms here and there. Mirai is bonkers. It's fun, but lord, it's bonkers. And, interestingly, we are supposed to be getting a new film from Hosoda later on this year entitled Belle, which apparently seems to be kind of in the same, I don't know if it's the same universe as Summer Wars, but it does take place in the same kind of aesthetic environment and appears to be very much a different take on Beauty and the Beast, so we'll see how that works. Once again, I thank every single one of you from the bottom of my story-driven heart for sticking around through all of the chaos we've all been going through. I hope all of you are staying safe, being smart, and finding a good story to tell. My name is EPZ379, and I'll see you for the next operation.